to the Construction Big Breakfast, where we give you a hearty serving of insider tips and business strategies to help fuel your day so you can thrive in the construction industry. Now, here's your host.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Construction Big Breakfast. I'm your host, Ben Pritchard, and joining me today are Niklas and Michael from Bimfire. Today we're going to talk about the Building Safety Bill, the implications that has on the construction industry, and maybe a little bit about how we can learn from Scandinavia, the UK, how we can share sort of how we adapt and adopt those changes. Michael, Niklas, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Sure, you go ahead, Niklas.
Hi, my name is Niklas. I'm head of digital design here at Bimfire Software. We are a software company trying to help basically the fire safety engineering discipline move away from PDF world into databases, basically.
And I'm Michael Strömgren. I'm the Chief Innovation Officer of Briab. So Briab is a sister company of Bimfire, where Briab is the consultancy part. We are 180 consultants in Scandinavia. So we have fire and risk engineers. And my background is within fire safety engineering and the research and development field. Where I've been working a lot with digitalizations, ways to meet compliance in fire safety, and how we can advance that in the ever so changing construction industry.
Excellent. And obviously, one question I need to ask you both before we dive into today's topic: what did you guys have for breakfast?
I will start. I start every morning with a cup of black coffee and one toast, with plain butter, nothing else.
Nice and simple, Niklas. Michael?
I had a cheese sandwich. My mornings are always stressful because we have two kids, 4 and 7, so the logistics in the morning aren't easy. But I had a cheese sandwich and of course the coffee.
Well, a cup of Yorkshire tea and a bowl of cereal was my choice this morning. It's the Easter holidays here, so the kids were still upstairs at the time, so that made it much easier for me. So the Building Safety Bill is something that obviously has been talked about, known about, maybe ignored in certain parts of the industry here in the UK, but imminently or possibly it will have just passed into law here in the UK. So before we sort of really get into it, would one of you like to sort of, or both of you, take turns in giving us a bit of an overview of what it is, what impact it is going to have on the industry here in the UK?
Sure, maybe I could start. So the Building Safety Bill, I think it's probably maybe the biggest reform on building safety in the UK as far as I know. And of course, you have to realize this is an outsider perspective. We're in Scandinavia, so we might miss some of the nuances. But I've been working a lot with European fire safety regulations, and I see it as one of the biggest reforms that we see in any countries in Europe right now. And one of the major things I think is the clarity on responsibilities. The bill is really taking a life cycle perspective on building safety, where fire safety is, of course, very much in the highlight. And I think that one key aspect is what's deemed as the golden thread of information. So basically, the idea is that without a proper information trail, we won't have the audit trail and the possibilities to ensure that we meet the fire safety objectives. And it's quite interesting from a much bigger perspective, because we've had very strong fire safety regulations and laws in Europe since even the medieval times. We have it's one of the oldest laws we've had in society, fire safety. So it goes several hundred years back. So I think this is a continuation of government having a very strong role in the role of building safety.
Niklas, anything else to add, or has Michael done a great job of framing the bill?
I think it had put it quite nicely. What I would say is the impact is quite hard to say because it's all a matter of what kind of information from the fire documentation you need to put in the database. Because maybe not all the information you want to be able to search for. Maybe it's just too much information, because too much information could be an issue as well, because someone needs to update it and keep track on it in the ever-changing building, especially hospitals or schools. But otherwise, Michael put it quite nicely.
So before we sort of delve into how it's going to, how the UK reacts to it, one thing I'd be sort of interested in knowing and understanding a bit more is, how does it compare to what you guys see in Scandinavia? Is this us in the UK catching up? Are we setting a new benchmark that the rest of Europe and other parts of the world will look at us and go, oh, we need to be doing that as well? Where are we if we benchmark ourselves globally?
Well, it's quite interesting because we did a comparison of the regulatory structures in UK and Sweden a few years back with an international renowned expert, Brian Meacham, where we saw there's a lot of similarities between Sweden and UK actually. But now I think with the bill, I think UK is progressing into new ground. It's very government driven, as I said. But we have yet to see the final standard from the industry on information. So we're expecting the British standard 86441 this summer, I believe, which will outline how will you be able to meet these new requirements and what will be the industry practice. And I think that's going to be the crucial part, because I see that there's always a risk when an incident happens that you over-regulate, that you increase the regulatory burden too much. We've seen that in Sweden and in many other countries in Europe. So it's and then you tend to to try to create leaner regulations eventually. And we have yet to see how this plays out. But I really think that if the regulations need to be efficient, and it has to be up to standards with the latest in digitalization, because that's I think digitalization and new ways of managing information effectively is what we need to have a reform that doesn't overburden the industry in practice.
Yeah, and I guess effectively is a key word there. I mean, you know, in your experience, both of you, and in terms of what you've seen, Niklas, designing sort of digital solutions for this part of the world, is the bill and the golden thread, you know, are we really creating more, or just a framework to better understand how to use what's already been created, or a bit of both?
What I'm afraid of is that you're going to create an information beast. Of the standards, what I've seen, especially comparing the architect model between Norway, Denmark, Sweden, the UK, it's quite similar. I know that in the UK, the models has a lot more information per component when you're creating those architectural models. The entire thing, what I'm going to hook in what Michael's talking about, when we have a standard, we can start actually have compliance in a different level of checking the information, like automatically. Right now, it seems like everyone doing their own thing. I hope the golden thread will create the standards that everyone can use, because still in Sweden, it's voluntary how to use BIM. It's basically construction companies telling you, we want this information. Because we have no regulation, and I'm hoping this bill will give some guidance on what information you can put in and how it should be used.
And I think that's one of the, you know, to achieve the golden thread of information, you won't be able to do that unless you take a sort of a digital approach to your processes, really.
Agree. Because we noticed when we started our digitalization of changing how fire safety engineers should work, in the beginning, the engineers wanted to add all this information about the stakeholders, the other stakeholders, the facility management. They didn't use it, so it was a waste of time. It feels like, because even though you create these perfect models, if in the end it's not used and you just only use PDFs, it's a waste of time. So it's quite interesting for us is what information, where, and how it should look like. So you can easily search them, you can find them, you can change them during the life cycle.
And who in the supply chain is this likely to impact the most? Is it your main contractors? Is it your architects, product designers? Is it impacting one part of the value chain more than the other, or everyone involved now has to stand up and be accountable?
I would say everyone.
And I could fill in. To me, it also has to be everyone, because I think what the Grenfell revealed is that everything is tied together. So there's no sole actor who can be solely responsible for fire safety, for example, because it's a co-work thing where you have to have the clear responsibilities and good communications in between these different actors who together create the fire safety of the building, and you have to have these clear responsibilities of transfer of responsibilities and so on. So that's I think that is one of the key points of the bill.
And I think it's also important that, although, you know, obviously because this is a reactionary in some ways to Grenfell, the focus is on fire engineering, but it is not just fire engineering, is it? It is the building safety bill. There's a little bit more to it than just good fire engineering.
Right.
I'm going to go backwards to the question again now. Everyone has to be responsible and accountable, but there are new roles almost being created, aren't there, by the bill, to really focus the accountability on certain people to be responsible and accountable for achieving the requirements of each gateway, and really being the owner of the golden thread. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So I think that ties back to the life cycle perspective, that these gateways points are created to make sure that you have the transfer of responsibilities in between, which also means that in all these phases someone will be responsible.
It's quite a scary proposition for a lot of people out there to try and work out where to go, to get their head around the requirements, to try and understand where to start. Does it impact me? When does it impact me? You know, there'll be lots of people out there just buying lots of software, which isn't necessarily the answer, because there's a bit of a cultural change required as well, as all that. Where do you think is a good place to try and understand how this might impact you, other than this podcast?
I would say start straight away. It's going to happen. Everyone's going to make mistakes in the beginning. The first project is going to be probably not that good. So I would say just start as soon as possible. Yeah, and I would say we have had the question or concern about the liability, about the question before, or the topic before, the liability. Having that information, how should that information get into my model, my database? And I think that's going to be more clear when the fire engineers actually start using a database, because they basically don't right now. They're using Word, Excel, that's it, PDFs. So I think the liability will be clear. But it's going to be a learning curve for everyone. So I think this start with a small one, probably the best case. If you have a big one, of course, you will have the financial part covered. But it's easier to create one small building than a larger one, and keep track of that and learn from that.
And I could also fill in that there's excellent networks in UK and also internationally if you want to learn more, like BIM for Housing, which is an organization in the industry who tries to facilitate this journey, and they even have a special work stream for fire safety. And there's also the international groups like Building Smart International, who works with open BIM standards and so on, where you can find build your network and find the peers who are facing the same issues.
And I would as well worth mentioning, I think, the facility management systems. I think that's going to be a big threshold to overcome for them. They're used to working not that much with databases, mainly paper, Word as well, PDFs, folders. I think that's going to be a huge threshold to overcome this bill.
The way we hand over information and data at each stage is going to have to be a lot better. You can't just have the sort of the drop and hope that someone picks it up and understands. You know, construction, once you finish construction, you're at PC. If the ops guys don't know what's happening and the maintenance guys don't know what's happening, you know, the real focus on life cycle is key through the bill, isn't it?
Definitely.
One of the when we talk about in the UK learning from Scandinavia in the construction industry, one of the things that we often look at is the embracing sort of timber as a material and how you guys use it much more than we do, much better than we do. But there is an unfair connotation probably that timber means fire. When it comes to structures. I mean, how do you help people understand that that isn't right? How can people just understand better what products to use, what materials to use when it comes to this as well?
Well, I'd say that there's really good. We've had really good research in timber fire safety for decades. We in Scandinavia we've introduced performance-based regulations in the 90s, and we have extensive experience of building with timber, where we've implemented the research findings in our building methods. But I think it's also important that we constantly learn of the new findings as well and address the new challenges. And I think some of the biggest concerns now in the UK is probably that parts of the regulations risk being more prescriptive. You may not be able to build with combustible materials in the same way that you could a few years ago. And of course, there's a concern in that area. So I think that's where you maybe the bill can introduce measures where you can raise the level of quality in several areas, and then be able to trust the industry more again. But it's I'd say that you really need a strong cooperation between industry, the research, and the and other bodies on the market who have a high competence in timber construction.
I mean, Michael used a word I talk about a lot there, trust. I think it's one of the things that the construction industry lacks more than anything. When we talk about collaboration, got a little guess behind you there, Michael. Are you an expert in fire engineering?
He couldn't hear you, unfortunately.
But yeah, trust. We talk about collaboration, we talk about using data and all this good stuff, but then we get in each other's way because we don't trust any of the information we share with each other at times. And you're right, you know, we've got to work collaboratively, cooperatively to help each other understand what the limitations are in terms of our own capability, our own understanding, and how we can fill the gaps in together.
Definitely. And one thing that we have to recall is that we've had I think many countries has had certain problems with different types of materials and construction methods, and I know that in the late 19th century we had a big problem with some steel construction in Sweden with collapses that occurred, and that's a non-combustible material, but you still have to address the material properties, right? So I mean, each material and method has to be assessed for their inherent properties. So I mean that's where we have to be. We have to trust our engineers and build the knowledge that we need for the task.
And you know, it all becomes so much easier if you've got a good database, Niklas.
Definitely. The searchability is everything from my point of view.
And the searchability then, which lets you, I guess it's all about whatever then, how you build a database, whether you're covering product materials, what documents you have or you don't have, all of that, just having it with good metadata, well tagged, all of those key things makes everyone's life easier.
Yeah, the main thing I can see as well is like right now we are in the middle of transformation. This transformation has been going on for a while, but we're getting quite good at creating design models. But then we need to trying to figure out a good way for all construction companies, for instance, to be able basically to create an as-built model, then needs to be translated later on to facility management and that life cycle. And I think that is whether it's material, what kind of products, what information is the key is what kind of information you need to track and what you need to have for information. Do you have to know all the different brands of all the components in your model, whether it's fire safety for fire alarms, or do you need to know it's a fire alarm? It's all that as well.
Yeah, level of detail is it's another argument and an important argument. Yeah, you don't need to know how many screws are in your fire alarm, but you need to know what the maintenance arrangements are for it, certainly.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I mean, we're almost progressing this conversation now then into digital twins. You know, does the golden thread by that need to collect the data, store the data, and continually monitor and maintain? Is that when you're starting to create a bit of a digital twin?
Yeah, we've seen a few experiments, so to say, with digital twins. We have a few municipals that use basically Revit model with entered data of as built that they're going to keep having alive their life cycle, changing the model, reading the information into their database more readable using floor plans. We have another solution that I've seen that is using point clouds. So you point cloud everything, and I want to use some AI to read what kind of components there are from the photos, basically, which is super interesting. But it's going to be maybe a hard time when you rebuild or change the layout of the floor plan. And I think it's going to be more. We need to have the bigger facility management, facility owners, basically to lead the way, I think, especially in Sweden, because we are quite bad in regulation. So every facility owner basically do this on their own. No one is forcing them, but they see at least the opportunities to save money, which is in there. And we don't have, I've heard stories about in the UK now, the premiums from the insurance companies going up. Yeah, and we don't have that issue here, but our facility owners actually see the possibility to even influence the insurance company. We can give you this information. Could you lower it?
Oh, it's interesting. I mean, often, I mean, government is the biggest client of construction one way or the other, directly and indirectly in the UK. So often, and it's worked well with things like the BIM mandate and other things. And now they've got a real push for offsite, and it's creating sort of an urgency in the industry to do it. So often here in the UK, we need that push. to do better. But we always we look longingly for certain things over to you guys in Scandinavia, and it's interesting that you've got none of that, but you still achieve it. So I mean, is that just a cultural thing, or is there something more that our historical expectation here in the UK? We're waiting for government to do something, so we'll wait until they do it before we do it, whereas you don't have that, so you just get on with it.
Well, I think that we, if we look into the mirror, I think we have similar problems in Sweden, but maybe they take a different shape. Because I'm leading another effort for trying to create a national strategy for standardization in construction, and we also in that area we see that the industry is waiting for the government to do something first before delving in. So I think that could also be an inherent problem for the construction industry, because there's so many different stakeholder groups, and the incentives for each group to make a change is too small for it to happen. And you don't have any big players who own a large part of the large part of the market to drive the change itself. So I think that's something with the sector that's probably common in most countries. But there maybe are other driving forces in Sweden as well. Niklas, what do you think?
I'm so simple that I would say one thing at least that I think is we got the small country syndrome, that we want to, if you get good at one thing, that put your country on the map. It's like if you hear your country in a TV show or a movie, you feel a little bit proud. Once again, it feels like, okay, we can at least be best in this one thing. And we tried that as well. Otherwise, we are one of, what I say, we are one of the countries more digitalized countries in general, even though the construction industry is of course way behind, 20 years behind minimum. And we're trying to catch up. So I think we have at least a little bit a better threshold or better way of going into this compared to maybe not the UK, but if you compare to maybe southern European countries, which are a little bit behind both the UK and Scandinavia.
Well, I think it's exciting times for the industry. I think there's so much happening now that is forcing our hand to become more digital, to consider social value, safety, end user outcomes requirements in a way that we've never had to. And it's exciting times about what we are currently building around the world and what we're going to build for the next few decades. So I think it's the perfect time to be in the industry. Amazingly, that is sort of half an hour. We've probably overrun slightly. I'll get told off by Sarah. So if we bring it to a close, if any of our listeners want to learn more about Bimfire, where's the best place to go, Niklas?
www.bimfiretools.com.
Cool. And Michael, you mentioned some of the research you're involved in. If someone's interested in hearing more about that, do they get in touch with you, or is there a website for that as well?
Yeah, they could go to a website. I can send you a link to the English version of our website where we have some of the research published.
Perfect, and we'll put that into the bio for the podcast. Well, both of you, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been a very interesting conversation, and I think the conversation around the Building Safety Bill will be one that will be had many a time for the next couple of years, probably as it gets rolled out and implemented here in the UK, and it'll be interesting to see what happens around the world about how it may trickle into your regulations and the way of work around the world. If any of our listeners today would like to put their thoughts on the Building Safety Bill forward, do get in touch. We're always keen to hear the thoughts and comments from our listeners. Please do remember to like, subscribe and share today's podcast, and look forward to seeing you the next episode. Thank you very much.
Want to learn more about how Invennt can help your business maximize its bottom line? Head on over to www.invennt.com and get in touch with our team today. Thanks for joining us this week on the Construction Big Breakfast. Make sure to visit our website, www.invennt.com, where you can subscribe to the Construction Big Breakfast on all platforms so you'll never miss a show. While you're at it, if you found value in the show, we'd appreciate a positive rating. Or if you'd simply share it with a friend, that would help us out too. Be sure to tune in for our next episode.